You don't belong here. This party is for real guests." The words cracked through the evening air like a whip, sharp enough to silence the hum of engines and the shuffle of gowns on the red carpet outside the Aurora Grand. Richard Coleman, the event manager, stood tall in his tuxedo, chin raised like a judge about to deliver a sentence. He didn't whisper. He wanted the insult to echo. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here." Now, back to Marcus Reed. Marcus didn't move. The insult washed over him like cold water he'd already endured too many times before in Atlanta hotel lobbies, in London boardrooms, in Los Angeles fundraisers. New city, same script. His eyes held steady, unflinching. Behind Richard, the Aurora Grand gleamed with excess. A wrought iron gate opened onto marble pillars, and a red carpet laid across cobblestones polished by history. Century-old oak trees stood guard along the avenue, their canopies glowing emerald under golden evening light. The building itself radiated old wealth and exclusivity. It was meant to intimidate. Guests arrived in waves. Limousines rolled to a stop. Rolls-Royces purred. Bentleys glided. Out stepped men in velvet tuxedos and women in emerald gowns, their laughter stitched with champagne bubbles. Flashbulbs from photographers popped like fireworks. Every detail screamed, "This is where the chosen gather." And yet Marcus stepped from a modest black sedan. No driver to open the door, no entourage to announce him. Just a man in a tailored but understated suit, gray tie, polished shoes. His presence didn't shout for attention, it demanded it quietly. That alone seemed to disturb Richard. At the podium, Holly Bennett scrolled her iPad with theatrical slowness. Her smile was honeyed, her eyes cold. "I'm sorry, sir. Your name isn't on the list." She tilted the screen slightly, as if the device had the final word. But she hadn't searched. She had skipped. Marcus's reply came low, steady, deliberate. "Check again." The crowd shifted. A man in a velvet bow tie smirked. A woman in silk whispered to her companion, "He shouldn't even be standing there." The disdain traveled like smoke through the line. And yet from a few steps back, David Chen, barely 30, a startup founder in a plain suit, paused. His hand hovered over his phone. "Something's off," he whispered to his friend. The first witness to feel the fracture forming. Richard adjusted his cufflinks, savoring the moment. His voice turned firmer. "Sir, I'll need you to step aside before security escorts you." The warning rang loud, the humiliation louder. Still, Marcus remained rooted, calm as stone, not because he lacked power, but because he carried more of it than anyone at that gate could imagine. Holly Bennett's manicured finger tapped the iPad again, slower this time, as if repetition could erase what was already written. Her lips curved into a smile that carried more ice than charm. "Still not here," she said, loud enough for the guests behind Marcus to hear. "Maybe you've mistaken this for a public event." Richard Coleman folded his arms, his voice slipping into condescension. "You should step aside, sir. We can't have interruptions on a night like this." His words were smooth, but his eyes betrayed satisfaction, the look of a man who thought he had just protected the gates of power. The line of guests shifted uneasily. A man in a midnight tuxedo cleared his throat. A woman in sequins raised an eyebrow. They weren't stepping in, but they were watching the spectacle of someone being told they didn't belong. From the side, David Chen kept his phone angled low, recording just enough to capture the exchange. His companion whispered nervously, "Don't get involved. They'll kick you out too." But David's brow furrowed. "This doesn't feel right," he muttered. His voice was almost lost under the hum of luxury cars pulling up. A Rolls-Royce stopped at the curb. Another couple emerged, dripping in jewelry, welcomed by the staff with applause and cameras. The contrast was painful. One path rolled out in red velvet, the other lined with resistance. Marcus stood still, unshaken. His silence pressed against the noise, a kind of gravity in itself. It unsettled Richard more than any protest could. Finally, Richard snapped his fingers toward a guard at the edge of the carpet. "Samuel, please escort this gentleman away. We can't let the line back up." The guard stepped forward, tall and broad, his steps echoing against the cobblestones. He wasn't reckless, but his presence was meant to intimidate. "Sir, I'm going to need you to move along." Marcus turned his head slightly, eyes fixed, voice calm but carrying weight. "I asked once. Check again." The guard paused, not because he understood who Marcus was, but because the tone didn't match the body in front of him. It was the kind of voice used to giving orders, not receiving them. Holly laughed softly, dismissive. "We know the list, sir. You don't belong in this space." And then, for the first time, a different voice broke through. An older woman in a crimson gown, Eleanor Price, one of Horizon Capital's longest investors, tilted her head, studying Marcus. She didn't speak yet, but her stare lingered longer than anyone else's. The gate felt heavier now, not just iron and marble, but the weight of history repeating itself. Marcus had seen this theater before scripted lines delivered by gatekeepers who believed access was theirs to control. He exhaled slowly, not with defeat but with patience sharpened by decades. Because what came next would not just change the night, it would change the story being told at that very gate. Richard's command still hung in the air. The guard Samuel shifted his weight, ready to move closer, when Marcus's gaze steadied on the iron gate. His silence stretched longer than the moment should allow, and in that silence, memory returned. He was 24 again, standing outside a hotel in Atlanta after a red-eye flight. He had walked into the lobby in sweats, reservation confirmed, credit card ready. The clerk looked him over, shook his head, and said the system was down. He could wait until morning when the manager was around. That night, Marcus slept in his car, headlights of passing taxis flickering across the windshield like reminders of where he did and didn't belong. The shame had burned, but it hadn't broken him. It had built him. That night became the first draft of a plan that would grow into boardrooms, acquisitions, and entire funds under his name. What they denied him then, he built himself. Back at the Aurora Grand, the echoes of that night pressed against his calm-like armor. Richard's smirk, Holly's false sweetness, the guard's looming stance, they were not new. They were familiar ghosts replaying an old script. Marcus inhaled once, shoulders square, voice steady. "You've made a mistake." The guard faltered again, not because he understood, but because Marcus's tone carried no trace of pleading. It carried inevitability. Guests around them shifted, whispers threading into the night air. A man muttered, "Why's he still standing there?" Another lifted his phone. The spectacle was no longer hidden. It was being recorded. David Chen's lens caught the way Marcus stood calm, immovable, as if anchored to the stones themselves. He whispered to the camera, "He's not just some random guy. Watch this." Richard's jaw tightened. His authority was slipping, but his arrogance clung harder. "Sir, last warning. You're embarrassing yourself." But Marcus had lived through embarrassment before. Tonight, he was about to end it. Richard's patience cracked. His voice, once polished, sharpened into something harder. "Enough. This event isn't for people like you. Step aside before I have you removed." The words landed heavy, the first open strike stripped of courtesy. Guests nearby froze mid-conversation, their laughter clipped short. The jazz drifting from the ballroom seemed to fade beneath the tension at the gate. Holly folded her arms, confidence swelling under Richard's lead. "We've seen this before," she said loudly, as if narrating for the line. "Someone shows up, dressed the part, claims to belong, hoping we'll overlook the details. But tonight, not happening." She turned towards Samuel, the guard. "Please escort him away." Samuel hesitated, but duty pressed him forward. He positioned himself closer to Marcus, broad shoulders blocking the red carpet. His hand hovered just inches from Marcus's arm, a signal of intent more than action. From the crowd, whispers grew sharper. A woman in emerald silk muttered, "This is embarrassing." A man in a velvet bow tie chuckled. Security should have dealt with him already. The disdain spread like wildfire. And yet, not all voices agreed. David Chen, still recording, whispered into his phone. "This doesn't add up." He doesn't look shaken. He looks like he owns the place. His stream was live now, tiny hearts and comments already blinking across his screen. Marcus's eyes never wavered. His stance was calm, his voice measured. "Be very sure of what you're about to do." The warning was quiet, but it sliced sharper than Richard's shouting. For a moment, Samuel's hand froze in the air, unsure. Richard stepped forward, seizing control, his face flushed, his tone louder. "Sir, I said move. You are holding up real guests. You don't belong on this carpet, in this space, or in this circle. Do you understand me?" The insult echoed under the iron gate, heavier because it was public. Phones tilted higher now. A middle-aged man near the fountain shook his head and muttered, "They're going to regret this." Eleanor Price, The older woman in crimson shifted her champagne glass from one hand to the other. Her eyes narrowed, studying Marcus with a kind of recognition the others lacked. She didn't speak, not yet, but her silence carried weight. Samuel tried again, voice firm but betraying hesitation. "Sir, don't make this harder. Just step back." Marcus remained rooted, his calm more commanding than any threat. "You've mistaken silence for weakness," he said, voice low but clear. "That was your first mistake." The line behind them stilled. For the first time, Richard's smirk faltered. The gate had become more than an entrance. It was a stage, and the entire crowd was watching the script unravel. The air outside the Aurora Grand thickened. Every guest still in line could feel it the moment when a confrontation shifts from words to something heavier. Richard's voice rose, brittle with authority. "Samuel, enough waiting. Remove him." The guard stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the red carpet. His hand landed on Marcus's arm, firm, deliberate. Gasps rippled down the line. It wasn't just exclusion anymore. It was contact. It was force. Marcus didn't move, didn't flinch. His eyes lifted to Samuel's, steady as stone. "Think carefully," he said quietly. Phones tilted higher. More guests were filming now. David Chen whispered into his live stream, "They're putting hands on him. This is not okay." Comments began to flood across his screen. "What's happening? Where is this? Stop them." Holly smirked, her voice cutting. "Sir, you've been warned. You can leave on your own, or you can be escorted. Either way, you're not stepping foot inside." She folded her arms, the picture of false certainty. For the first time, Eleanor Price set down her glass. Her voice was soft but carried through the silence. "Careful," she said, her eyes locked on Richard. "You don't know who you're speaking to." Richard turned, irritated. "With respect, Mrs. Price, we know exactly what we're doing. This gentleman is not on the list." His tone had the brittle edge of a man who felt control slipping but refused to admit it. Marcus's calm was a deeper silence than the crowd expected. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead. He simply said, "You're about to regret every second of this." The crowd shifted again. A man near the gate muttered, "He doesn't sound like someone bluffing." Another, phone raised high, said loudly, "I've got this on video." Samuel's grip loosened slightly, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. But Richard doubled down, his words sharp and cruel. "You don't belong here. People like you never do. Security, finish it." The insult, laid bare for everyone, hung heavier than the chandelier's glow spilling from inside. Guests gasped. Some shook their heads. The tension was no longer hidden behind polite whispers. It was open, undeniable, and caught on dozens of recording devices. And in the center of it, Marcus Reed remained immovable, a storm contained in silence. His composure was no longer just patience. It was power waiting for the exact moment to strike. Richard's face flushed red, his voice sharp enough to pierce the murmurs of the crowd. "This is finished. You don't have an invitation. You don't belong in this space, and I will not allow you to embarrass our guests." His words weren't just firm, they were venomous. He wanted everyone in earshot to hear them, and they did. Holly leaned into the moment, her tone dripping with disdain. "It's always the same story," she said loudly. "Someone trying to slip past, thinking we won't notice. Well, not tonight." She folded her arms like a judge delivering a final sentence. Samuel still stood with one hand hovering near Marcus's arm, but now his posture wavered. He wasn't blind. He saw the phones raised, the guests recording, the way Marcus's composure didn't match the role Richard tried to force on him. Gasps broke through the line when Richard finally said the quiet part out loud. "People like you don't get in here." The words struck harder than any shove. Guests reacted instantly. A man in a navy suit muttered, "Did he really just say that?" A woman holding a clutch whispered to her friend, "This is disgusting." Someone else said more loudly, "Keep filming. Don't stop." Eleanor Price's voice cut through, sharp and deliberate. "Richard." Just his name, but weighted with warning. He ignored it, too wrapped in his own authority to notice the floor shifting beneath him. David Chen's live stream spiked with comments, hundreds flooding in by the second. He whispered into his phone, "You're watching this live outside the Aurora Grand." They're refusing him, even after... He stopped, eyes narrowing as Marcus stood, still and unbroken, in the center of the storm. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low but carrying enough to silence the whispers. "You think power is standing at a gate. You think authority is holding a list. but power doesn't look like what you think it does. The line went quiet. Even Samuel's shoulders tensed at the shift in tone. Richard forced a laugh, brittle and shallow. What are you going to do? Call the cops? You're already finished here. Marcus's eyes never left his. Calm, steady, unflinching. No, he said simply. You are. The silence that followed was thick, electric. The crowd didn't know why yet, but they would soon. Samuel shifted uneasily, his hand still hovering near Marcus's arm. He had followed orders 100 times before, but this felt different. Something about the man's calm presence pressed against him harder than any command Richard had ever given. Richard, refusing to yield, barked, "Enough hesitation. Escort him off the property now." This time Samuel obeyed. His hand clamped firmly around Marcus's arm, a deliberate act to force him back. The crowd gasped. A woman near the gate shouted, "You can't just grab him like that." Marcus didn't resist. He didn't yank his arm free. He simply stood, letting the action speak louder than any protest. His silence magnified the injustice, and every raised phone captured the moment frame by frame. Holly smirked, emboldened by the sight. "There we go," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Problem solved. Let's move along." She waved toward the next guests in line, as if Marcus were nothing more than an inconvenience cleared from the carpet. But the line didn't move. No one stepped forward. All eyes stayed on the man being pushed aside. David Chen's voice trembled as he spoke into his phone. "This is happening live. They're forcing him off the red carpet even though he asked them to check again. Look at him, he's not resisting, he's not yelling, he's just standing there." His viewers responded in real time. "This is wrong. Unbelievable. Name and shame the hotel." Richard doubled down, his tone crueler than before. "You should have known better. This isn't your world. You don't belong among these people." Those words hung like a noose in the night air. They weren't just policy. They were prejudice laid bare. From the edge of the carpet, Eleanor Price stepped forward, her heels clicking against the stone. "Richard," she said sharply, "that's enough." But Richard ignored her. He leaned closer to Marcus, his voice dripping with contempt. "Take a good look around, sir. These gates don't open for everyone, and they will never open for you." The statement landed like a final blow. Gasps erupted. Someone shouted, "Did you hear that?" Another voice answered, "Every phone here did." Marcus finally turned his head, his eyes sweeping the line of guests, the flashing cameras, the raised phones. Then, steady as ever, he looked back at Richard. "You've mistaken this gate for power," he said quietly. "But the truth is, you've just locked yourself out." The crowd froze. They didn't know what he meant yet, but they were about to find out. The crowd buzzed with disbelief, whispers colliding under the golden lights spilling from the ballroom. Every phone seemed to be recording now, the glow of their screens reflecting off marble pillars and polished stone. Marcus stood still, Samuel's hand still pressed against his arm. Then, without raising his voice, without breaking his calm, he slipped his free hand into his jacket pocket and drew out a phone. Richard scoffed. "Oh, wonderful. He's calling for backup." His tone dripped with sarcasm. "Who are you going to reach? The police? They'll side with us." Marcus pressed a single number, lifted the phone to his ear. His voice was even, controlled. "It's happening," he said. On the other end, a woman's voice answered without hesitation. "Protocol is live. Systems are ready." The words sliced through the tension like steel. Marcus lowered the phone slightly, letting them carry just far enough for the closest guests and Richard to hear. Richard laughed, but it rang hollow. "What? Systems? You really think anyone here cares about your games?" He turned to Holly with a smug smile. "Delete his name from the record. If he was ever there, he's gone now." Holly tapped at her iPad, fingers moving fast, but then she froze. Her screen flickered. A sharp beep echoed. She tapped again. Nothing. The guest list had locked. "What?" she stammered. Marcus's voice was calm, almost quiet, but heavy enough to silence the chatter. "That's the last time you try to erase me." The guests leaned closer, eyes widening. David Chen's live stream caught every second. "Something's happening," he whispered to his viewers. "The system just froze." Comments poured in. "No way. He's in control. This guy isn't bluffing. Who is he?" Richard's face tightened. "Some glitch. Nothing more. Samuel, get him out of here." But Samuel hesitated. He glanced at the phones, at the crowd, at Holly's pale face as she jabbed helplessly at the frozen tablet. His grip loosened slightly on Marcus's arm. Marcus lifted the phone back to his ear. "Confirm visual capture," he said. The voice answered instantly. "Confirmed. Every device in range has logged the exchange. Secure copy saved." Gasps broke across the crowd. They understood now. Every insult, every touch, every word was no longer just spoken, it was documented. Immutable. Richard's authority wavered for the first time, the flush on his face replaced by the first flicker of fear. Marcus's gaze was steady, unbroken. "You've tried to define who belongs. Tonight, the record defines you." The marble steps outside the Aurora Grand had become a stage. Phones hovered like spotlights, recording every breath. Richard's smirk faltered, but he forced his voice to carry. "This is a circus," he barked. "You're all being manipulated. He's nobody." Nobody. The word hung sharp in the warm night air. Marcus let the insult rest there a moment, as though weighing it, then lifted the phone once more. "Confirm audience," he said calmly. The voice on the other end answered without pause. "External broadcast live. Over 1,200 active viewers. Multiple streams." David Chen's voice broke in. Steady now. Stronger. And counting. He turned his phone for emphasis, showing the chat scrolling faster than anyone could read. Richard paled. His control was unraveling in front of the very people he'd sought to impress. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "Samuel, shut this down." But Samuel didn't move. His hand had already slipped from Marcus's arm. The weight of the moment pressed heavier than Richard's order. Marcus stepped forward, his voice even, his presence commanding. "You've asked who I am. You've told me I don't belong. You've tried to erase me from a list I wrote." Gasps shot through the line. Holly's face drained of color. Eleanor Price finally spoke, her voice firm and unshaken. "I knew I recognized you." She turned to the guests still lingering on the carpet. "This man isn't just on the list. He is the reason tonight even exists." The ripple was instant. Guests whispered. Phones trembled as they refocused on Marcus. Richard stumbled. "That's impossible. If he were important, I would have known." Marcus's gaze locked on him. "You didn't know because you never bothered to look past the surface." He let the silence breathe, then delivered it like a hammer. "I am Marcus Reed, chairman of Horizon Capital, the fund celebrating its 50th anniversary tonight." The crowd erupted in gasps, in murmurs, in disbelief turning quickly to awe. David's stream exploded with comments. "Wait, he owns it?" This just flipped completely. "Justice." Eleanor began clapping, the crisp sound cutting through the shock. Others joined hesitant at first, then louder, until applause rolled across the marble like thunder. Richard's face collapsed, his voice thin. "That's not possible." Marcus stepped closer, his presence now undeniable. "Not only is it possible, Richard, tonight I announce a $10 billion expansion, and the only thing you've succeeded in doing is showing this audience exactly why it matters." The applause rolled like thunder across the marble steps, echoing off the wrought iron gates. The same gates that minutes earlier had been used to keep Marcus out now stood behind him like a backdrop to his triumph. Phones tilted higher, catching every angle. Viewers online were flooding streams with fire emojis, exclamation marks, and 3 simple words. "He owns it." Richard's posture collapsed. His polished authority drained from him, leaving only a trembling man in a tuxedo too big for the moment. "No," he stammered. That can't be right." But Holly's face confirmed it all. She had gone pale, her tablet frozen in her hands. Guests leaned toward her, whispering. She couldn't meet their eyes. She had erased a man she should have bowed to. Samuel stepped back, shame written across his face. He had touched the arm of the man who signed his checks. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Sir, I didn't know." Marcus's gaze moved from one to the next. Richard, Holly, Samuel. Calm, steady, deliberate. "You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You judged before you asked. You acted before you saw." The silence was crushing. Even the music from inside the ballroom seemed to have stilled, as if the building itself was listening. Eleanor Price broke it first. Her voice rang proud, almost celebratory. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are standing in the presence of Horizon's chairman. Tonight, you nearly watched him turned away from his own celebration." The murmurs swelled. Some guests shook their heads in disbelief. Others muttered words of disgust toward Richard and Holly. A man near the front said clearly enough for the cameras to catch, "Unbelievable." They tried to humiliate him at his own event. David Chen's stream surged past 5,000 viewers. He looked straight into his phone, eyes fierce. This is what prejudice looks like, until truth walks in and turns the lights on. His comment section exploded. "We see it. We feel it. Never again." Richard tried one last desperate protest, his voice thin. "This is all a misunderstanding." But the crowd no longer believed him. Guests pulled away from him, literally stepping aside to make the gap between him and Marcus wider, as if isolating him. Marcus stood tall, not triumphant, but resolute. "This isn't a misunderstanding, it's a pattern, one you thought you could repeat tonight." Phones caught every word. The night had shifted. Power was no longer with the gatekeepers. It was with the man they tried to erase, and the witnesses who refused to look away. The applause tapered into silence, but the tension didn't fade. It thickened. All eyes were on Marcus now, waiting to see what came next. Richard's mouth opened, fumbling for words that might stitch back the authority unraveling from him. "Mr. Reed, please, this was a miscommunication. If we could step aside and resolve..." Marcus lifted his hand, and the words died in Richard's throat. "You had your chance to act with dignity," Marcus said evenly. "Instead, you chose arrogance. You chose prejudice." His gaze swept to Holly, still clutching her frozen tablet like a shield. "And you chose deception." Then to Samuel, whose broad shoulders had slumped into defeat. "And you chose obedience without thought." The crowd shifted, murmurs rippling. Phones stayed raised, lenses unblinking. Marcus's voice sharpened. "As of this moment, none of you represent Horizon Capital. You do not speak for us. You do not stand for us. And you will not work another night under our name." Gasps erupted, followed by a stunned hush. Richard stumbled back a step. You can't." "I just did," Marcus cut in. His tone was final, steel under velvet. Holly's face crumpled, her voice trembling. "Sir, Marcus didn't flinch. "You erased me from a list I built. Tonight, you erase yourself." The weight of his words landed like a gavel. Samuel lowered his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed. I was following orders." Marcus studied him, then shook his head slowly. "Justice doesn't care about orders. It cares about choices, and you made yours." The silence stretched. Eleanor Price stepped forward, her heels clicking against the stone, and addressed the crowd. "You've just witnessed integrity in action. A man denied at the gate of his own legacy, and instead of lowering himself, he lifted the standard higher." Applause burst again, stronger, fiercer. Guests clapped not just for Marcus, but against the humiliation they had seen. David Chen's stream exploded with comments. "Accountability, that's real leadership. This is history." Richard stood frozen, eyes darting to the phones, capturing every angle of his downfall. For the first time all night, he seemed to understand the permanence of what had just happened. Marcus turned away from him, his voice carrying like a verdict. "The gates are open now, for those who build, for those who dream, for those told they don't belong." The words hung in the night air like a promise and a sentence. The red carpet no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like a path, his path. Marcus stepped forward, leaving Richard, Holly, and Samuel in the shadow of their own undoing. The iron gates that had been a wall moments ago now opened wide, as if acknowledging the man they had tried to bar. Inside, the chandeliers glowed brighter, spilling gold across the ballroom. Music swelled again, but softer now, as if the entire building was holding its breath. Guests parted to make way. Applause following Marcus as he crossed the threshold. Every camera caught it. Every phone streamed it. And every witness would remember it. Marcus reached the center of the marble floor, turning to face the crowd both inside and outside the gates. His voice carried, calm but commanding. Tonight was meant to celebrate 50 years of Horizon Capital. But this moment has revealed more than history, it has revealed truth. The room stilled. Marcus continued, steady and clear. "For too long, too many have been told they don't belong. At doors, at tables, at gates built to exclude. I was told that tonight. But I stand here not as a guest. I stand here as the one who built the table." Applause broke again, strong and rolling, spilling into the night. Marcus raised a hand, and silence fell once more. "That is why Horizon Capital is proud to announce a new commitment, $10 billion invested into the future, not for the few who guard the gates, but for the many who have been shut out of them, for innovators, for dreamers, For those who refuse to let prejudice define their worth. The words struck like lightning. Guests erupted, clapping, cheering, voices rising with relief and pride. David Chen's phone shook in his hand as he streamed. "You're hearing it live! $10 billion! This is history being written!" His viewers poured comments across the screen. "Goosebumps! This is justice. This is what leadership looks like." Eleanor Price stood, her applause sharp, deliberate. "This," she said to those near her, "is why he leads us." Marcus let the noise swell, then spoke the final words with quiet conviction. "I don't need your recognition. I don't need your permission. I am the reason this night exists." And with that, the cameras flashed, the crowd roared, and the story closed not with anger, but with dignity etched into every device, every witness, every heart present at the Aurora Grand. The man they tried to erase had just written the ending himself.